Welcome into America's Retirement Headquarters, home of the Retirement Guys Formula and America's Medicare Associates. Securities offered through Peak Brokerage Services, LLC. Advisory services offered through the Retirement Guys Formula, registered investment advisor. America's Retirement Headquarters, America's Medicare Associates, and the Retirement Guys Formula are separate and independent entities from Peak Brokerage Services, LLC.
I want to thank you for joining us today and welcome you into America's Retirement Headquarters. It is the home of the Retirement Guys Formula and America's Medicare Associates with Dave Ross and Scott Kirshner. Myself, my name is Chris Swan. 419-794-3030 is the phone number. It's 419-794-3030, online, arhq.com. Today on the show, we often hear that cash is king, but can you have too much of it? Do you have an estate plan in place? We'll talk about when and why you should. And more Americans are retiring before the age of 65. How do you plan for that? All this and more. But first, before we dive into any of it, let me check in. Scott, Dave, glad to be with you. How you doing today?
Chris, we're doing well. It's been a long time since I pulled an all-nighter, but I actually, Friday night into Saturday, I pulled an all-nighter. And it wasn't the good kind of all-nighter. I got a phone call at 10 minutes till 1 from my mother.
Oh.
Now, when you get a call at 10 minutes to 1 from your mother, and especially when she's 86 years old, you know it's an issue. She had a little health setback, so we went to the hospital. I got home at 6 a.m. So it was a long night and morning, and I slept half of the day Saturday. But boy, the weather is really starting to get nice around here. And Sunday we had a great day, did a lot of yard work, and I'm feeling the pains and aches of muscles I haven't used in a year. So, but it's pretty good. How about you, Dave?
Well, I played my first 18-hole round of golf on Saturday, and it was beautiful. But man, the wind just kills me.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I can't hit the ball anywhere into the wind, and it was just a mixed bag of good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, that happens. But at least you got out and got to play in it.
Absolutely.
Of course, like Chris, down there where you're at, you've got sunshine and warm weather pretty much year round, right?
Not year round, but certainly right now, and it's only aiming to be hotter this year, so it's going to plan for that. First off, before we dive into the meat of it, let me say, Scott, I'm glad that you were able to be there for your mother, and hopefully things have calmed down there. Dave, it's a great metaphor, knowing that the weather is going to dictate how the game is played and being able to navigate around it, being able to plan for that. That's kind of a good metaphor for what you guys do with retirement planning, knowing that there are going to be these challenges along the way in retirement, whether it is, taxation, whether it is market volatility, things like that. And then having someone on your side. Think of you guys, think of the team at America's Retirement Headquarters kind of like caddies guiding you through it. So something to keep in mind as you go through, this next great, the back nine of your retirement, I suppose, as it might go. But the number again, 419-794-3030. Now, the number that people think that they need to retire, it's gone up 50% in just 4 years, now at $1.5 billion. But one planner at Northwestern Mutual believes the number you should be focusing on is actually your savings rate. John Rowland says, I would much rather have clients save 15% of their income, get a 5% rate of return, than save 1% of their income and get a 15% rate of return. Do you guys often have to refocus your clients to a conservative approach rather than a swing for the fences approach when it comes to returns?
That when I read through that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. Saving 1%, getting 15% on return doesn't sound like that's a good way to go. But, we've done many shows on this topic, and I know every one of these shows that we've done, that number seems to be, that magic number of how much do I need to retire seems to change every time we do the show. So that leads me to a question for you, Dave, because obviously this is more where you operate and this is your lane. But do you think that obviously with the economy and the way prices are, when people are looking and putting money away and saying, man, how much am I going to need for retirement? Obviously, if you go back, 15, 20 years ago, life was a lot different back then. But today, it changes almost year to year, and definitely changes when you have a new administration come in office. When you look at these prices of gas and groceries and things like that, do you think that really weighs on why that number is 1.5 million now versus 1.27 just a few years back?
I think everything in regards to these types of numbers is situational. Let's look back at 2020 for a second. At this time, what were we doing? We were sitting at home. And you know what? I think I'm speaking for more than just myself. I was redoing the inside of my house because we weren't going anywhere. We went to work, but we wouldn't necessarily see clients at work. We would talk to them on the phone. I think it's very situational in terms of, how much you need. And I think a lot of things what that number is based on is what's actually happening, situations that arise. And quite honestly, I think people react more to what happens versus saying, oh boy, I went to the grocery store and I had to pay $35 for a good steak. They don't talk about that, but that's when you talk about rising prices and inflation. That's kind of where it's at, but that topic doesn't come up a lot with me anyway.
Yeah, those costs are ever changing. And, I would totally agree with you because I look at that myself, right? And, how much money am I going to need to retire? And I think when I talk with clients and, which we'll talk in a segment coming up here about a client that I actually met with. But when I talk with clients and they say, geez, I don't know when I can retire. I don't know how much I'm going to need to retire. I agree with you. It's situational, and everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? Because things change in your lifestyle. You're not necessarily driving to work anymore. Everything kind of changes on your needs and your expenses. So it really doesn't matter. I guess, my question, I guess I'm answering it myself. It really doesn't matter as much about how much the groceries are costing or how much gas is costing, because you're not driving to work every day. So you're not filling that tank up, every, couple of weeks and spending, a couple of $100 of fuel cost. It's changing when you go through retirement. Chris, you're obviously a ways away from retirement now, but do you look at things like that as well and say, gosh, I remember when, mom and dad looked at retiring, and now I'm going to need X number of dollars to retire. How do you see this?
Well, first of all, my dad has the luxury of 2 pensions. And so, that helps him tremendously when it comes to that retirement planning and helping them with the process still with things that they haven't thought about. By proxy of working with you guys, working alongside you guys, I've made them aware of things like RMDs. And it also helps me with planning for myself, obviously tucking money away, the 401k, the company match, the free money, things like that. And knowing that it's not so much having to go without, because budgeting is a I don't know. I feel like that's a word that a lot of people frown on, but knowing that I do need to save now to plan for the future is both a challenge and something that I'm aware of. Sometimes I do better at it than I should. Sometimes I do much worse at it than I should. But I think it's having that discipline, and that's something that I need to continue to work on. But as you pointed out, I still have, without giving away my age, I still have a decade or two before it really becomes a situation. But it goes to show there's no time like the present to really get serious about retirement planning, right?
I think that $1 million is a magic number that everybody loves to hear. Hey, I'm a millionaire. But you're right, Chris. I totally agree. Budgeting and preparing for it now versus waiting until your retirement date is around the corner. I had a client in last week, and I've been working with him for probably a couple of months. And my first appointment with him was, you know what? I think I'm going to work another couple of years. He's turning 65. April he did. And he comes in, schedule appointment, comes in. I'm like, oh, well, here we go again. We're going to talk about it. And he said, they let me go. So there's a situation where his plans were a couple more years. And boom, now he's retired. And if he would have, not properly prepared, he could be in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, it just goes to show occasionally it is taken out of our hands. The big number, obviously, if you've got $1.5 million or whatever, you're probably going to be set up, but it really depends on what you're going to be spending every year in retirement, knowing that. it comes down to individual circumstances. I know that sounds like a vague answer, and truth be told, it is. But you want to figure out what it is going to look like for you in your retirement. That is the retirement that you want, and that is where having a plan put in place to take care of that comes into play. The team at America's Retirement Headquarters, they can help you craft that plan with the Retirement Team Action Plan. Just find out more. You can give a call, 419-794-3030, or you can go to the website as well, and that is at arhq.com. You know, we all have retirement dreams, and a lot of us will save our retirement years for the things that we've always wanted to do. But if the cost of those experiences busts our budgets, people will wonder if it's actually worth it. Here's actually a list of the 4 money splurges you'll never regret in retirement from GoBankingRates.com. Splurges on your health, splurges on your family, on travel, and on charity. So I have to wonder, how does the conversation go when talking with your clients? Is it, let's pare this back a little bit, or this is what you save for, go ahead and do it?
Well, I would say that this is a unique discussion topic, all 4 of these areas for each and every client. So when you talk about splurges on your family, I'll use a little personal insight here. So I'm close. I could retire in a year or 2 years, but I'm not going to because I have a 21, a 19, and a 17-year-old at home. So we're putting 2 through college. So that's definitely a splurge. Mm-hmm. And then guess what? They're going to all get married someday, I hope. That's going to be a splurge. So you think about family, you know, you want to do things. You want to take trips. You want to, while you're healthy and able to do it, you want to have experiences with your children, your grandchildren. And I'm going to be a really old grandfather, I hope. So you know what? It's splurges on your family. Splurges on travel. You know, I look at retirement 3 phases. You've got the go phase where I'm going to travel. We're going to do the things we always wanted to do. And maybe we have the funds earmarked for that. Then there's going to be the slow go where maybe our health is starting to get in the way a little bit. We still can do some things, but we're really picky about what we want to do. And then there's the no go, which is your health is keeping you close to home. Your family will come and visit you. You aren't traveling much at all. And you're in a better than survival mode, but you're definitely in a slow mode where you're just kind of trudging through life on a daily basis. So yeah, family and travel, those are 2 big splurges, but they kind of go in cycles.
Yeah, there's no question. You know, when I look at this, you know, do we advise paring back a little bit and maybe being a little more conservative? I always look at that. And I tell all of my clients when they come in, I say, you know, because I'll ask them if they have a financial advisor that they're currently working with. And if they do, you know, I always say, well, you know, that's well and good, but have they kind of changed gears for you a little bit? Because when you're moving into retirement, you know, it's one thing to be real aggressive when you're younger and in your earning years and can afford to be aggressive and lose if the market does, you know, pull back a little bit. But, you know, one of the things that I love on one of these splurges is health. You know, I think that's very important to, if you have the resources available, and you've got those buckets of money, because remember, you know, we always talk about Nolan's independent income system. And if you've got that bucket of money set aside to splurge during retirement, spend some time and money and effort on your health. You know, now I'm not referring to it because I sell health insurance and Medicare, but I'm referring to, you know, treat yourself to maybe that spa day, you know, get, you know, a nice massage, you know, spoil yourself a little bit and take care of the things you need. Maybe, you know, diets today are so expensive because for some reason, all of these organic foods are so costly that a lot of people don't eat as healthy as they should. You know, your mental health is very important, and spoiling yourself with that, you know, doing some hobbies. You know, we were talking before we came on the show about pickleball and having some, you know, enjoyment doing that. Those are the type of things that you want to splurge on for yourself, you know, your own well-being. And charities, I don't think anybody would ever regret donating money to any charities. There's a lot of charities that we deal with here. Nolan is very, very good at, donating a good amount of money to different charities in need, with him being a veteran working very closely with Hooves, which he does, being on the board there. So there's a lot of charities that he contributes to. I remember we had a little cookout picnic here at the office, and we had 3 different charities, and one of them was building beds. And they had a little area set up outside here where we literally were building beds for those, youth and people that might not have a bed and maybe be sleeping on the ground in sleeping bags and things like that. So it was really, really fun and exciting to be able to do that. And I think we built I don't know, it seemed like we built like 10 beds. Our goal was to build like 10, and we built 10 of these beds, which was a lot of fun. So, we can help you kind of put some things together and kind of plan on the splurges, the things that want to make you happy. Like you said, family and travel. I know I've taken some pretty nice trips. I've done some cruises, and it's really hard to pull that trigger to spend that money. But boy, when you're on that vacation, it helps everything that we've talked about here, right? It helps your health. You're a lot more relaxed. It's fun. Once that money is spent, just enjoy yourself. So absolutely, Chris, we definitely help a lot of people out with these kind of things. And we want to make sure that if you're aggressive right now and your plans are to, splurge on, health, family, travel, or even charities, we want to make sure that you're prepared for that and got money set aside to make sure you can get that done.
Because everyone's retirement plans are going to look a little bit different. But, I don't think anyone out there, their plan is to just wake up, putter around the house every day and then go back to bed and have that be the entirety of their retirement. No, you are meant to literally reap the fruits of your labor, but you don't want to overextend yourself and find yourself down the line in trouble because you did indulge too much. There's a balance there, and it comes back to having a plan and making sure it all works out. And that includes, budgeting for some of these indulgences, these splurges, if you want. And the team at America's Retirement Headquarters, they can help you run the numbers and show you where you are and how to achieve those things that you want to indulge in. 419-794-3030 is the phone number. You can go to arhq.com and find out more about the independent income system. You can also just Google independent income system, or you could set up a time at that same website, and that is arhq.com. Now, despite what all the doom and gloom that the financial talking heads may be painting out there, a lot of people, they're actually still retiring early. In fact, a recent study by the Motley Fool found that more than half of Americans retire at age 61 or earlier, and almost another 25% retire somewhere between 62 and 64. So whether they think it's early or not, most people are, in fact, retiring before 65. Guys, what challenge does that pose, and how do you help them plan for that?
Well, there's several challenges, and this is one of the things that I think our team here at America's Retirement Headquarters does a fantastic job at. There are a lot of things that are going to come up, and if you're not prepared for retiring before 65, and you haven't met with somebody on our team about some of these items here, you could be setting yourself up for a disaster. I'll tell you this. I met with a client last week, and it is exactly about what this topic is. So I had an appointment with a husband and wife, and both of them are turning 64 the end of this year. One's November and then one's the January. So we started talking about healthcare. And the guy says, well, I'm going to need some sort of health insurance from the time I retire, which he was looking at the end of the year, for 1 year. I said, well, you're both going to need healthcare for 1 year. So I went through the Unaffordable Care Act, and I put in some of the numbers that they were looking at. And based on proper planning that Chaz put in place, their income, their reportable income, was going to be at such a low number that they were able to pay zero for their health insurance. Now, they also had a son that was 20, I think he's 23 years old, a student in college. So he needed health insurance as well. So what that did was I was able to show them that healthcare is one of the areas that is not going to prevent you from retiring at 64 years old. Now, some of the other things to be prepared for is if you're looking at retiring before 59 and a half, you're subjecting yourself to a penalty if you are planning on taking any money out of your investments. Right, Dave? I mean, prior to 59 and a half, you're going to pay penalty plus income, right?
There's a situation, it's called a 72T, which is a little bit unique. So if a person knows that they're retiring prior to age 59 and a half, they can throw all of their IRA money into an account, and they'll be required every year to take a required distribution from the total amount of their IRA portfolio or their retirement savings. You can't hold any amount of money aside and say, oh, I'm not putting that in there. You have to put it in. And a lot of times when people take a look at that, they say, oh, how do I get to 59 and a half? I actually have a client that I did that for. We came up with a plan to get her to 59 and a half so she could turn on her IRAs and not have to go the 72T route. But people that aren't aware of that or don't have an advisor, they could find themselves in a world of hurt as far as that 10% federal penalty for early withdrawal if they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and the other thing is Social Security. If you're this particular gentleman was actually looking to start taking Social Security at 64. And so we talked about that as well. And we're going to talk about that in one of the next segments coming up here. But, if you take Social Security, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the show. If you take it at 62 years old, you're locking yourself in. You're basically penalizing yourself at that lower amount of Social Security for the rest of your life. And, there's a lot of different theories on that. If you want to know more about what our thoughts are and how we help clients with determining when to take their Social Security, you can visit our website. And, like Chris says, we're on different Spotify and a lot of different outlets where you can catch our shows. But, here's just, a few, taking money out of 401ks prior to 59 and a half, you're subjecting yourself to some penalties. If you're looking at claiming Social Security, you could be penalizing yourself for the rest of your life. You may be paying a small fortune when it comes to healthcare. If you have to go, if you're not 65 and you retire early, you've got to get coverage somewhere. You either have COBRA as an option, which, everybody doesn't quite understand how COBRA works. It's the same benefits that you currently have through your employer. It's just you're paying all of the premium versus the employer paying some. The Unaffordable Care Act is going to have a very high premiums if you don't qualify for subsidies, and the deductibles and out-of-pockets could be looking at, $19,000 or more. So you want to make sure that you're properly preparing and set up for retiring prior to 65. Chris, those numbers, when you mention these numbers, to me, it's kind of cyclical because I can remember, 3 or 4 years ago when we were doing the radio show and we were talking about people retiring earlier. And I said, it's crazy because I've had an unusually large amount of people working past 65 and into, their late 60s, and some people even working up into their 70s. And now reports are showing that people are starting to retire early again. So, it's cyclical. I think a lot of it, some people just get, quite frankly, sick and tired of working. Maybe the job or things have changed. And they just decide, hey, I'm ready to pull the plug and let's figure out how I can retire. So, come out and visit with us. We can help you determine whether or not you can retire prior to 65 and what that's going to look like.
It definitely comes off as a measure twice, cut once sort of situation when you retire early. So many things to take into consideration. Not to say that it is impossible to do, but you want to run the numbers beforehand and make sure you don't have to do the thing that I think we all want to avoid, and that is find yourself having to unretire down the line. The team at America's Retirement Headquarters, they can help you start developing that plan, run those numbers. Here's the number for you to keep in mind right now, 419-794-3030, or you can go online to the website, and that is arhq.com. We were talking about Social Security, and with Social Security, the longer you wait to claim, the bigger your check. But what if you retire at 65 and you want to wait until 70 before you start taking your benefits? How do you fill that gap? How do you bridge that gap for those 5 years? An article suggests using your 401k as a, quote, Social Security bridge. Their argument is that 401ks run out. Social Security, it does not. Guys, what do you think of this strategy?
Well, I got to tell you, I love this topic. When I first came over here 5, almost 6 years ago now with Nolan Baker and the team here, we started doing a lot of joint events. We would do a Social Security, and then I would come in the second half of the event and talk about Medicare. Because, Social Security and Medicare, you sign up for Medicare on the Social Security website, right? And one of the topics that they would talk about with the Social Security is this very issue. Taking Social Security off, maximizing your monthly benefit, and waiting until 70. And one of the things that I have found sitting in the audience and listening to this was I found it to be somewhat confusing. A lot of people look at their Social Security statement and it says full retirement age. And a lot of people look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's when I have to retire. No, that does not mean that's when you have to retire. So I wish they could change that verbiage, because it's not necessarily your full retirement age. What it is it's the time that you can start drawing Social Security and still make income without being penalized, right? So the other thing that they would talk about is putting off taking Social Security until 70 and maximizing your benefit. So I mentioned in the first half of the show about a client that I met with, and I want to tell you real quick this story about this client, because this is exactly the second half of that story. So I met with this client. They had approximately $550,000 in investable assets currently with Chaz, as a matter of fact. Of that, $135,000 of it was in a Roth IRA. So I was actually working with their health insurance and explaining to them about how that's going to work. So for 1 year, they're going to take any supplemental income they need out of the Roth because it's not reportable income. So then we started talking about Social Security, because he says, well, I'm planning on taking it at 64. His wife was already taking her Social Security. Okay. And she turned 64 January. So she was locked in at, I think it was like $1,100 a month. So some of the things that we do, Nolan Baker and Chaz and Dave, when they sit down and talk about what's the optimal time to draw your Social Security, this is some of the things that they'll ask you. So when I met with this client, they already had prepared what their monthly expenses were going to be. And I'm like, wow, you're way ahead of the game. So they hand me a piece of paper and they said, this is how much we need on a monthly basis. So I looked at their Social Security that she was getting, and then I looked at his and I said, well, based on some of the assets that you mentioned you have, you might want to put this off to at least 67. Okay, because remember, he was going 64, so I was just looking at 3 years initially. Putting it off to 67 got him over $700 more a month for the rest of his life. So I was looking at this, and he said he needed about $2,500 a month for a 3-year period out of his investments. So I ran the numbers, I did the math for him, and taking some money out of his $550,000 that he had invested and showing him how to bridge that gap by utilizing the 401k money, putting off taking his Social Security is going to get him $700 more a month for the rest of his life. Now, the other thing that you guys all ask, and I even ask as well, is a lot of this has to do with genetics, right? So I asked him, I said, well, how about mom and dad? How, are they still living? He says, well, dad passed away. I said, well, at what age? 87. I said, how about mom? He said, she's still going strong. She's 92. So he's got some pretty good genes, right? So I then showed him if we could manipulate this to work for him at taking it at 70. That number was like an additional $1,100 a month. And if you look at that number over, get him to his dad's age, 17, 18 years, he was looking at making, several hundred thousands of dollars over the last 17 to 20 years of his life. And these things just make sense. I love working with people with this and showing them how this works and bridging that gap. Dave, how do you talk to people with this when this topic comes up, and how do you show them how the covering that gap would work?
I would say that I probably spend a lot of time discussing the concept of what full retirement age actually is, because if a person's going to retire early, and what I mean by that is prior to 67, I'm 66 and 8 months for Social Security.
Mm-hmm. So
what happens if you get to 66 and 8 months and you say, gee, I'm in poor health. My parents didn't live to be like this couple's parents. You might want to turn on your income at full retirement age. But you know what? If I'm 65
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to retire, I think you look at it in increments. So I'm looking at getting from 65 to 66 in 8 months.
Sure.
Once I get to that full retirement age, then I can turn on my Social Security and I have to worry about the penalty. I get to 66.8. Maybe my investments have continued to chug along, and we can look at trying to get to 70.
Sure.
So it's not like you present it in the tone that, oh, you can't touch it for 5 more years. No, it's actually could be a year-to-year thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that's kind of difficult for me is when I meet with someone who hasn't really put a plan together, and they tell me that they've already turned on the Social Security.
Yes.
Because then I can't do anything. They're locked in for life. And you know what? I'm not going to tell them if they made a mistake. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a non-judgmental number of what they can count on in retirement. And hopefully it's enough to cover their needs under the independent income system. So, retirement plans have to be flexible. They have to be able to roll with the current situation. And we all know that current situation could change very, very quickly depending on health and other factors. So yeah, it's definitely a moving target as far as when to turn on Social Security.
You brought up a really good point there, Dave. It's not, it doesn't mean if you decide, you know what, I'm going to wait until 70 and something changes when you're 68. Well, I said I'm going to wait until 70. I have to. That's not the case at all. I mean, anything, you can turn it on anytime you want. Obviously you can turn it anytime you want after 62 years old. The longer you wait, you optimize that monthly benefit. So when we talk about this topic, and we absolutely have a non-bias approach to this, where we will help you understand what's going to be your best option. When I was done with this client, they said, man, this just makes perfect sense. You've completely changed our mind on this. And the other thing is, they've got the resources. They've got over $550,000 available to them. For them to take $50,000 of that and to bridge that gap is still going to leave them with, a $500,000 investment that is continuing to grow, and they're going to get $700 more a month for the rest of their life. So these are just some examples of how we work with clients when they come to us and ask, when should I take Social Security?
And of course, the question becomes even more muddied when you take into account a spouse, being married. There's more taken to play, survivor benefits, things like that. The average man lives to the age of 78 right now. So you may think, why would I wait as long if I'm going to be getting less years of benefits? That's one of the things that comes into play. The argument that the Social Security does not run out. So let me ask really quick, with the conversation right now being around the solvency of Social Security, and potential changes coming down the line within the next 10 years. Has that changed an outlook, the approach when it comes to the right time for people to claim Social Security?
I certainly think it factors in because they're saying at 2034, there could be a 20% cut. Mm-hmm. So here's something to think about if you're sitting out there listening to this. What if you delay Social Security and try to optimize it, which is try to get as close all the way up to 70 if you can. If you can do that, and then the government indeed cuts Social Security benefits 20% in 2034, that 20% reduction will probably put you somewhere in that neighborhood of what your full retirement benefit would have been. Mm-hmm. So it's better to be safe than sorry. If you can optimize, it's certainly something that it's a discussion that should be had with everyone.
And again, it's not a decision that the people at the Social Security office can help you make. They are there to help you process the paperwork and show you what your benefits are going to be. You want to do a little bit of homework beforehand. Better yet, let the team at America's Retirement Headquarters help you with that and figure out with their unbiased, advice there and show you how it's all going to factor into play. 419-794-3030 is the phone number. The website, arhq.com. Dealing with dementia in the family is difficult enough, but there are also legal considerations. Case in point, former Tonight Show host Jay Leno was recently granted a conservatorship of his wife Mavis's estate because of her condition. Both of them are in their 70s, and NBC News correspondent Vicki Nguyen says families in similar circumstances can prepare with proper estate planning.
It's a legal process. You have to file a petition with the courts, and it's cumbersome. And so experts we talk to say you really want to consider estate planning. You don't want to wait until you've been incapacitated because of old age or illness. No one wants to have this conversation, but we have to think life is fragile. It doesn't take a dementia diagnosis for things to be upended, right? So if you have this conversation ahead of time, you're saving your loved ones a lot of heartache during what would be a tough time anyway, and potentially fighting with the family. Otherwise, it's all left up to the courts if you don't prepare, right? It goes through the laws in your state, and the courts decide who makes these decisions for you.
Now, we often talk about the getting to, through, and beyond retirement. Estate planning is a portion of that beyond retirement. Explain what the first steps are in the estate planning process with you guys, and when should that actually begin?
Well, this is a tough one. I just want to throw out to all of our listeners, we do a lot of events here. I'm actually going to be hosting an event. It's not actually up on our website yet, but we have a lot of our events up on the website. But we're going to be hosting an event for caregivers. We're looking the end of June time frame for that. But basically what we want to do is, make people aware of what hurdles you have to overcome when you're dealing with someone that is going through, whether it's dementia or just the day-to-day caregiving. I opened the show saying that I spent the good part of the weekend in the hospital, taking care of mom and letting the doctors and nurses take care of her. And I am that person. So this is very near and dear to my heart because I am that person that is the caregiver. So I've got a lot of advice and stories for people. The first steps, the first steps and when should you do it is probably as soon as possible. You don't need to be a certain age to put a estate plan together. Nolan and I have actually co-written the Ultimate Estate Planning Guide. And basically what we do with that is, most people will meet with an attorney, and the attorney has these cookie cutter templates for estate planning that you fill out. And it's got your standard stuff in there. It's got your beneficiaries. It's got a list of all of your accounts. It's got all of the standard traditional things in a estate plan. We took it a step further, and going through this with when my dad passed away and taking care of things for my mom, we added some topics in there about cell phone. If the one spouse that passes away is the primary bill paying person or has all of the accounts set up, if you don't know the cell phone passwords, if you don't know the account secret codes and all of those type of things, you can't get into anything, and they will not tell that surviving spouse any of that information. So we've added in our Ultimate Estate Planning Guide a section where we list all of those pertinent things you need. If you're moving into a new town, if you go to your local Chamber of Commerce, they'll have a printout. Most of them have a printout of the local garbage refuge place that you contact to set that up, your utilities, the phone numbers, and things like that. Well, we've kind of integrated that into the Ultimate Estate Planning Guide. So there is no certain age when you have to set these up. The sooner you get it put in place, that's one thing you can check off of that list of things that you need to be prepared for. As far as putting documents together for people dealing with dementia and the survivors or the people taking care of it, like Jay Leno, the conservatorship is very, very important. And, we can assist you with all of that. If anybody listening today would like a copy of our Ultimate Estate Planning Guide, we offer that to everybody and anybody for no charge at all. We're happy to send that out. If you reach, either email us or reach out to us through the website or call the office, we'll be happy to get that put in place for you and just get something in the mail to you. These are things that are very important. Dealing with someone with dementia or dealing with someone that has some health issues where you're the caregiver, you have a tremendous amount of responsibility there, and it's very traumatic. It's a situation where you have to see your loved one at their worst periods in time of their life. And, a lot of times I come across families, multiple family, siblings in that. And a lot of times I hear the stories where, I'm not getting a whole lot of help from my brother or my sister, or this, that, or the other. And they're the only ones that are going in alone. So, this is kind of a difficult topic to talk about because it's so near and dear to my heart. But Dave, what can you add when it comes to dealing with estate planning and the whens and the whys?
Well, I think everybody better have a health care power of attorney in place and a durable power of attorney. Health care is important because, you know what? My wife and I actually talked about this a couple weeks ago. I don't want to be on life support.
Right.
If I'm not there as the Dave Ross that my wife knows, then I don't want our life savings to get taken up by paying for life support. But it's more than just speaking to your spouse, or you have to make it official. And by having that health care and durable power of attorneys, you're going to have that. And then there's no discussion about it. There's no emotions about the kids saying, oh, no, we want to keep dad going. No, make your wishes known. Make sure other people know what your wishes are. It's simple things, making sure your beneficiaries are up to date and accurate. With so many marriages ending in divorce, sometimes accounts don't get switched to spouse number two. And you gotta look at all of that. Ownership issues. Sometimes it makes sense if the other spouse owns something versus, my wife owns most things because she's a lot younger than I am.
Sure. So
being comprehensive, but also dealing with the topics that are important. I lost both my parents suddenly. And I thought, woe is me, woe is me. And now that I have friends and family members that have been caregivers for people that have dementia and Parkinson's and all kinds of terrible diseases, I think, boy, maybe I shouldn't have been woe is me. That's kind of the way I would like to go. I'd like to just check out, but I wouldn't want to do it without making sure all my T's are crossed and I have all the documents that I need.
You know, I've for 30 years I've been in the business. I've sold life insurance and health insurance and annuities, and I've passed out some pretty hefty checks on some life insurance claims. I've got countless stories, and I won't go through obviously any of those because we just don't have the time to do that. But I had a client sitting in my office, and he said the same thing. He said, actually, believe it or not, it's the same client I've been talking about in a couple of segments here. He said, I don't want to live that long if my quality of life isn't there. Now, we don't have a whole lot to say about that, but like you said, Dave, if you don't have the proper things put in place, you're at the mercy of what other people are going to do for you. I do have one situation where a guy was 69 years old. He was working at Chrysler, and he had a heart attack, ran off the road, and he was actually he was actually technically dead for 45 minutes. They brought him back. And the unfortunate thing with that for him is it caused some brain issues with having loss of oxygen for that long. And he's currently in a rehab facility, and this situation is horrible because they didn't have anything put in place. They hadn't, we've talked about long-term care insurance and things like that, and he definitely will go into a long-term care facility. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is they're going to have to exhaust all of his resources before they'll, any assistance will kick in, and the wife is just beside herself. I've been working very closely with her, trying to help her out with that. And, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's a case where they did not have the proper things put in place to take care of unforeseen situations like this. So there again, when you're looking at estate planning, make sure you take the first steps, and you can do that at any time. Get a copy of our Ultimate Estate Planning Guide. That doesn't mean you're signing up for anything, but what it does mean is you're taking the first steps to actually prepare for the unforeseen things that might happen. And then from there, we can sit down and go through and make sure that review that plan and make sure that the beneficiaries are up to date, and make sure that all of the accounts are in proper order to help you mitigate any issues that you're going to have in the future.
As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we understand that it is not the most pleasant conversation to have, but if it does prevent more uncomfortable conversations happening down the line because of a lack of planning, what do we do now? How are we going to make this work? I dare say it is something worth doing ahead of time, while you still can. Go ahead and take that preventative measure. Get a copy of the Ultimate Estate Planning Guide. Reach out to the team, arhq.com's website, 419-794-3030. Whether it is, talking about the estate planning or any other facet of your retirement, the team is available and ready and willing to help you out with that. Again, 419-794-3030. I want to thank you, as we always do, for joining us here on America's Retirement Headquarters with Scott Kirshner and Dave Ross. Really do appreciate you taking the time. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Hope you get to enjoy some of this nice weather you've got out there. Guys, appreciate your time as always. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with the final word.
Well, I want to thank you, Dave, and thank you, Chris, for helping with the show today. I really appreciate it. There again, visit our website, arhq.com. We've got all of our events listed there. We've got a couple events coming up June 4th and June 6th for Medicare. Those people that are turning 65 in the from the 1st of June through the end of the year. This event is perfect for you. We've got several events out there, so visit our website. And once again, thank you for listening. Here we are at America's Retirement Headquarters. Have a great day.
America's Retirement Headquarters is located at 1700 Woodlands Drive in Maumee, Ohio. You can reach them by calling 419-794-3030 or online at americasretirementheadquarters.com. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. Investments can fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested. Nolan Baker is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. Please consult with your attorney, accountant, and or tax advisor for advice concerning your particular circumstance. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through Nolan Baker, Ohio Insurance License Number 27787.